The most ruthless, primitive, and effective weapon in the Kremlin's arsenal was not a missile or a tank. It was winter itself, which Putin had turned into a modern instrument of terror. The strategy of freezing Ukraine, extinguishing the lights of civilization, drowning it in darkness, and ultimately breaking its will, was the purest reflection of Putin's untouchable arrogance and moral bankruptcy. This strategy has been implemented with ruthless precision since the start of the war. By mid-2024, Ukraine had lost a third of its pre-war electricity generation capacity. Damage to the sector exceeded $16 billion, while reconstruction costs were estimated to reach approximately $68 billion. In early October 2025, this arrogance reached its peak. On October 3rd, Russia launched 381 drones and 35 missiles at facilities in Kharkiv and Poltava. The attacks left tens of thousands of people without electricity in the Sumy and Chernihiv regions. The Russian Defense Ministry, in its usual cold and dismissive tone, announced that all military targets had been successfully hit. This was the latest and most brazen manifestation of the Kremlin's assumption of impunity. According to them, the Russian homeland was a completely isolated, untouchable fortress, immune to the consequences of this savagery. But they were wrong. On the night of October 5th, the tide of war turned. Ukraine launched a heavy retaliatory strike. More than 250 drones and numerous missiles attacked more than 7 Russian regions, primarily Belgorod and Bryansk. Their targets were energy infrastructure. The 110 kilovolt transformers at a thermal power plant in the city of Klintsy in the Bryansk region were targeted by a missile or kamikaze UAV attack believed to belong to Ukraine. This attack caused a major fire. Footage published on Russian Telegram channels showed part of the facility engulfed in flames. The situation was even more dire in the neighboring Belgorod Oblast. The targets of the missiles and UAVs were the 60-megawatt Luch thermal power plant, the energy heart of Belgorod Oblast, which meets 36.3% of the city's heating needs, and the critical electrical transformer center connected to it. Videos confirmed to be from the moment of the attack and whose geographical location was identified showed that at least 5 separate precision-guided munitions had hit the facility. The attacks caused significant damage to the region's energy infrastructure. More than 40,000 people were left without electricity in Belgorod alone. A total of 24 settlements were plunged into darkness, and water shortages occurred. Over 1 million Russians were caught in the middle of this chaos. Moreover, these facilities were not randomly selected targets. This was a demonstration of Ukraine's intelligence and military planning capabilities. The Belgorod thermal power plant is known as a facility based on Western technology, modernized in 2007 with General Electric turbines. This modernization had increased the plant's capacity and efficiency. The Luch transformer station, beyond distributing this energy to homes and businesses in the city, also served to provide electricity to military bases, supply lines, and logistics centers in Belgorod. Striking both targets simultaneously was the result of sophisticated strategic planning, aimed not only at turning off the lights, but also at crippling the city, the military line, and logistics at the same time. Belgorod is connected to many military facilities that supply ammunition, personnel, and materials to Ukraine's Kharkiv front. In addition, the Bryansk line serves important ammunition and supply connections via railways and roads extending south. This attack was more than just a technical disruption. It was a direct bullet aimed at Russia's military energy backbone system. Immediately after the attack, local Telegram channels were flooded with civilian videos showing the moments of the explosions and the fireballs lighting up the sky. This was a raw, unfiltered reality that propaganda could not control. Independent OSINT analysts quickly geolocated these leaked civilian videos, confirming that the strikes directly targeted critical transformers at the Luch substation and the foundation of the building housing the thermal power plant's gas turbine units. Thermal data from NASA's FIRMS satellite system showed intense heat anomalies lasting for hours in these areas, scientifically corroborating civilian accounts. The equation was now simple and visible to the entire world. Every dark night Russia inflicted on Ukraine would now return to its own cities. With a single precision strike wave, Belgorod's decades-old, smoothly functioning power grid collapsed. The system that fed more than 500,000 people and kept the city's civilization alive, shut down in seconds. The streets were instantly plunged into complete chaos. The Luke transformer station and the heart of the thermal power plant were blasted. This was the reality that the war was now being fought not only on the front lines, but in Russia's own home, in the kitchen of an ordinary citizen, in their child's room, and on the street they walked down every day to work. The domino effect began instantly and mercilessly. Traffic lights went out, the city's main arteries turned into a giant parking lot within minutes, and the sound of horns mingled with the sound of sirens. Hundreds of people were trapped in the elevators of high-rise apartment buildings, inside metal coffins. Water pumps stopped. The water flowing from the taps first decreased, then stopped completely. The internet and mobile communication infrastructure went offline, and the city was suddenly cut off from the modern world and the flow of information. Shops either closed their shutters or could only sell with cash, because credit card systems were not working. This was not just a power outage, it was the unraveling of the entire social and economic fabric of a modern city, its entire nervous system, in a matter of seconds. Hospitals and police stations had to switch to emergency generators. However, how long these generators would last and where fuel would come from was a complete mystery. Moreover, just a week before this attack, Belgorod had experienced the same thing. Russian propaganda could have presented this as a terrorist act, an anomaly, through the state television channel it controlled. However, on October 5th, the second identical symmetrical attack, coming just hours after Russia bombed Ukraine again, changed everything. The Luch transformer station was hit once again, and repair efforts were futile before they even began, plunging the city back into pitch darkness. This second strike proved to the people of Belgorod that retaliation was no longer a possibility, but a certainty. The war had come home to their doorsteps as the inevitable price of their own government's every aggressive act. The fear of a random terrorist act gave way to the expectation of an inevitable outcome, a mathematical certainty. Amidst the chaos and uncertainty, Regional Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov appeared before the cameras, his face weary and anxious, confirming the situation as significant power outages. But the real confession, the shocking confession that shattered all of the Kremlin's propaganda walls, was hidden in the sentence that followed. The governor warned the public that there could be malfunctions in the missile threat warning systems due to the power outage. This was not a simple announcement of a technical malfunction. This was an admission of helplessness from the highest level of the Kremlin. The state was not only failing to protect its citizens from the direct consequences of its own actions, it couldn't even warn them of the next impending danger. This moment was when Vladimir Putin's implicit social contract with the Russian people was torn up before the eyes of millions. This contract was based on a simple equation. Give me political loyalty and obedience, and I will provide you with stability and security. On the nights of September 28th and October 5th, both sides of this equation were crushed. Stability had given way to unpredictable chaos. Security had turned into a bitter lie. That night, stability was gone in Belgorod. Putin's promise of protection was reduced to ashes in the flames rising from the Luch transformer station. This was not only a loss of comfort, but also a loss of Kremlin control. The state propaganda machine was unable to stop the wave of panic, anger, and helplessness spreading through local telegram channels. This was a defeat in psychological warfare. Can Russia prevent these attacks? The short answer is the one Moscow fears most to hear. No, at least not without paying a heavy price and making painful concessions. The long answer reveals the strategic impasse facing Putin's war machine, where each option is worse than the next. Ukraine has not only brought the war onto Russian soil with these attacks, it has also turned Russia's greatest strength, its vast geography, into its greatest weakness. The question now is not how powerful Russia is, but how many different places it can spread that power at once. Let's examine the potential moves facing the Kremlin and why each one is a trap. On paper, Russia appears to have military options available to halt these attacks. However, each option carries the risk of creating a fatal vulnerability on another front. The most logical first step would be to dismantle advanced air defense systems, such as the S-400, S-300, and Pantsir S-1, stationed on the Ukrainian front, in Crimea or around Moscow, and redeploy them to protect cities close to the border, such as Belgorod, Bryansk, and Kursk, as well as strategic refineries in the interior. This is a complete, blanket dilemma for the Kremlin. When you try to cover your feet, your chest is exposed. When you try to cover your chest, your feet are exposed. Every Pantsir battery withdrawn from the front line means a Russian command center, ammunition depot, or troop assembly area that is vulnerable to Ukraine's HIMARS and Storm Shadow missiles. Every S-400 withdrawn from Crimea leaves the Black Sea Fleet or the Kerch Bridge more vulnerable to Ukraine's Neptune missiles. Putin faces the horrific choice of sacrificing his soldiers on the front lines to protect transformers in his own cities. Furthermore, Russia's geography is so vast that even if you protect a few cities, Ukraine will simply redirect its next attack to another vulnerable facility hundreds of kilometers away. This is an unwinnable game of mole hunting. Another move would be to use Russian intelligence to identify the points from which Ukraine launches UAVs and missiles and destroy them before they can attack. While this is theoretically the most effective solution, it is nearly impossible in practice. Ukraine conducts such operations not from fixed bases, but with highly mobile and camouflaged units. A HIMARS battery can fire its missiles from inside a forest and relocate within minutes. UAVs can even be launched from the beds of civilian pickup trucks. Russia's weak intelligence gathering and instant target destruction capabilities throughout the war are the biggest obstacles to finding and destroying such mobile targets. The Kremlin risks wasting millions of dollars on hypersonic missiles in this ghost hunt. Another measure is to deploy more electronic warfare systems around cities and facilities to jam the GPS signals and command links of UAVs. This method is only partially effective against drones that rely solely on simple commercial GPS systems. However, Ukraine now uses drones equipped with more advanced technologies, such as inertial navigation systems, INS, or AI-powered terrain matching. These systems are unaffected by GPS jamming. Missiles, on the other hand, are much more resistant to such jamming. Furthermore, broadcasting a powerful jamming signal over a very large area could blind not only enemy drones, but also Russia's own civil aviation, communication networks, and even military systems. This is a situation where the antidote could be more dangerous than the poison. Where military solutions fall short, the Kremlin's strategic and political options are equally problematic. One could try to respond to each Ukrainian refinery attack by striking 2 or 3 more energy facilities in Ukraine. The goal is to raise the cost for Kiev so high that it gives up on continuing these attacks. This is a strategy Russia has already tried for a long time and failed at. Ukraine has weathered even the darkest winters. Its people are united, and it has received massive support from the West to make its infrastructure resilient to such attacks. Russia's retaliatory attacks, rather than breaking Ukraine's resolve, only serve to legitimize its own attacks on Russian territory internationally. Kiev uses the argument, "Look, while they are doing this to us, we have no choice but to defend ourselves," even more powerfully. This is proof that Putin's energy war has turned into a complete boomerang and has now created a self-perpetuating cycle of violence. Threatening nuclear weapons could be used to pressure Western capitals, especially Washington, through diplomatic channels to stop providing Ukraine with the long-range weapons and intelligence needed to carry out these attacks. This is the method the Kremlin has resorted to most during the war, but with the least results. After more than 2 years, the West has become largely indifferent to Russia's nuclear bluffs. Moreover, Western leaders now understand that Ukraine's ability to strike at Russia's strategic depth is not only essential for Ukraine's survival, but also the most effective way to force Russia to the negotiating table and end the war. Therefore, it is more likely that the West will increase its support rather than cut it off. In other words, Ukraine's attacks have caused a social and political crisis in Russia. This crisis has also opened up a new economic front that is unsustainable for the Kremlin. Ukraine's new doctrine has put Russia in a military and economic checkmate position. Protecting dozens of thermal power plants, transformer stations, and oil refineries spread across Russia's vast territory was an almost impossible task. Protecting these facilities forced Russia to withdraw its most valuable and scarce air defense systems, particularly the Pantsir and S-400 batteries, from the front lines and redeploy them to inland areas. This meant weakening military strength at the front. Moreover, this defense had become an economically asymmetrical nightmare. Against a drone used by Ukraine costing approximately $35,000, Russia had to use a defense missile such as NASAMS or Patriot, costing over $1 million. Each defense was a massive economic loss. Ukraine was inflicting hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure damage and defense costs on Russia, with tens of thousands of dollars worth of ammunition. This was a self-operating economic strangulation mechanism that was slowly draining the blood from the veins of the Russian war machine. As a result, Putin pulled the plug on Ukraine throughout the war. Last night, Ukraine pulled the main fuse in Russia. This was one of the most striking moments of the war. So what do you think? How will Ukraine's retaliatory attacks against Russia's aggression change the course of the war? How will Russia cope with this chaos on its own territory? Share your valuable opinions and analyses with us in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like this video to support our independent analyses.